That's what a hypothesis is all about. So in conducting any research, it is really, really essential for you to also formulate a hypothesis, especially if you are doing a quantitative study. It is really key that you develop a hypothesis. So maybe let's use the same study. You want to find out how people are anxious. So your hypothesis more or less like you're supposed to make a prediction among certain individuals. Maybe you want to find out which group of people will be more anxious. So it could be that you can hypothesize that, oh, males will be more anxious than females, or even level 100s will be more anxious than level 400s. That's a typical hypothesis. So you are making a prediction between groups, which people will be more anxious than the other. That's a typical hypothesis, which would also guide you in your research work. So what are the processes we go through to conduct any research work? It means that first you're supposed to find a problem. So the problem that we found was that, oh, we realized that people are more anxious getting to the latter part of examination. Or sorry, the beginning of examination. So that's the problem that you've identified. So what do? You go to the field to collect data. So we would do that later, how to collect data or data collection process and all that. So simply, you've realized that you found a problem, people are anxious. So you try and get something, an instrument that you can use to measure maybe anxiety during the data collection process. So after you've collected your data, you come back to analyze. And we have several statistical tools we use in analyzing data. So you analyze the data to find out which of the groups that you've hypothesized were more anxious. So you analyzing will give you a clue as to whether your hypothesis will support or not. Whether your hypothesis that, okay, males will be more anxious than females supported or not. So after you've analyzed and you've realized that, oh, your hypothesis supported, truly males were more anxious than females, what do? The end goal of every research work is to find solutions to the problem. So it means you can stipulate or indicate some recommendations that can be used to solve the problem. So after you've made those recommendations, as a researcher, you go ahead. If you know the policymakers, you would submit your proposal or your recommendations to them so that they can use it to implement solution to the problem that you've identified. So that's the ultimate goal of every research. After you've conducted the research work, you shouldn't end. So that's why researchers, they've created a platform, an online platform that's journals whereby they publish their paper so that policymakers could go there, find out certain recommendations that they've made and use it. All right. So in most situations, in some research work, we try to conduct research just to derive some theories. So for instance, the popular psychoanalysis theory that you know, Sigmund Freud theory, for instance. Freud conducted certain research work, and out of it, he was able to formulate a theory. So he used someone known as Anna O, studied her for a longer period, then out of it, he was able to derive certain information and make certain conclusions leading to a theory. So it means that in developing or in finding a problem, you can use the problem to derive a theory. and say that, oh, due to A, B, C, and D, there's a higher probability that the same thing will happen later if the same situation or the same phenomenon happens again. So theories are made out of what? Out of a problem that we've identified. That's the ultimate goal. So we normally say that in any theory, it should be able to explain. It should have few concepts so that it could explain a lot of phenomenon. When we say it should have few concepts, it means that we don't want to bore our readers with a lot of information, a lot of concepts, because we normally see that, you know what the principle of parsimony is all about. If you have two propositions and they can explain the same phenomenon or concept, then it is better to use what? The simpler one, rather than going in for the complex one. So it means that as a theorist, or anyone who wants to develop a theory, when you are developing the theory, you shouldn't bore your readers with a lot of concepts out of your theory. The concept should be something that should be easier to understand, simple, so that out of it, people can get a lot of information from it. Then the theory should also be testable. It means that it should be tested, or it should go through the rigors of time. So for instance, most of the theories that has come up, okay, it has survived a lot of tests in that regard. So in developing a theory, you shouldn't have it in mind that, oh, I'm developing a theory so that it will be true. Everything about it will be true. It should be tested. It should go through some series of tests so that a lot of researchers could go through your concept and say for sure that, oh, if the concept that you've spelled out, if we go through, definitely we are supposed to arrive at what? At a particular thing. So for instance, Freud's theory. Freud normally talk about the fact that childhood experiences influences us most. So it means that anyone who tests this theory should trace back childhood experiences and find out whether childhood experiences truly affect our behaviors, our adult behaviors. So you could see that when this is tested, there's an iota of truth in what Freud is saying. That's the ultimate goal of any theory. There should be some sort of truth in it, and it should be tested for us to know that definitely, truly, it is what it is. All right. So I wouldn't bore you too much with information about the hypothesis, because I know you've come across it last semester. You know that we have two types of hypothesis out of this. So the key thing is knowing what variables are all about. So it means that when it comes to variables, we have various forms of variables. We have different types of variables. We have participant variable. So who knows what a participant variable is all about? A participant variable. So if you have a clue, you can use the emoji to raise up your hand.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
Yeah, please, can we say the participant variable is the same as the independent variable? Or the variable that is being manipulated? Or
I don't want to nope. I wouldn't buy that. So any clue about what a participant variable is all about? Samuel.
So can you also refer to it as a determinant variable?
How?
The variable that determines the direction of the research.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Jamila.
Is the characteristics of the individuals.
Exactly.
Like
Exactly. Come again.
Is this like subject variables? They seem as subject variables.
They same as subject variables. And we normally say that with a participant variable, it helps us to know the different individual characteristics we can find in a participant. So for instance, maybe you've selected University of Ghana distance students. Out of these students, we have, or each and every one comes in there with different characteristics. So that's the participant variable that we are talking about. So in this, we have males and females. We could also have level 100s up to level 400s. Okay, we can also have age differences, marital status differences, and all that. So all these are what are participant variables. The different characteristics we can find in our participants is what is referred to as participant or subject variable. All right. Then the next one is response variable. Any clue? Response variable. Okay, so another name for response variable is what? Okay, Ethel, your hand is up.
So it's also known as dependent variable.
Exactly. Okay. So what does it really mean?
So it depends on other variables or focuses on other experiments for response.
Okay. All right. Judith.
Please, it can also be called the outcome variable.
Okay.
I think that is actually what the researcher's question is all about.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, all right. So one thing about response variable is that basically it is the variable that the researcher measures. Basically, it is a variable that the researcher measures in the study. So it is also known as dependent variable or the outcome variable. Yeah. Okay, then what of situational variable? Situational variable. I can see some hands up. I don't know whether it is for the previous ones or Linda.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes. The situational variables, it's more or less they are environment that can affect your results.
Okay. So I get where you're coming from, but one thing you should know is that the situational, it is not of the interest of the researcher, but at the long run, it could unintentionally affect the results or the study that the person is doing or the researcher is doing. So it means with situational variable, there are variables which are of no interest to the researcher, but could have an influence on the study. A typical example is, let's say you want to investigate how caffeine influences individuals' mood. So you select 10 participants. Then unfortunately for you, the room that you were using, the air condition, it was not working, and the environment was very, very hot. So it means that since the environment is hot, the participants are panting. So you don't know whether truly it is the caffeine, which is really what? Influencing their mood, or the air condition, which is not working. So you could see that your main interest is what? Is to find out how caffeine influences mood. But there's a third variable, which is causing you or which is influencing. So you don't know whether it is the air condition, which is the third variable, or the temperature, the room temperature, let me put it in that fashion, which is causing that, or the caffeine. So that's why in research work, situational variable could be a form of extraneous or confounding variable. So we will talk about it later. So we don't know. So in most situations, it means in research work, it is very, very key that you make effort to reduce all forms of situational variables. So if you know that, okay, room temperature could, to a large extent, influence your study, you make effort to reduce its effect on your study. All right. Then the last one is mediating and moderating variables. So mediating, we normally say that mediating variable, to a large extent, explains why there's a relationship between variables. I'll explain that. Then moderating variables, to a large extent, helps us to know, it changes the direction of the relationship between two variables. So for instance, I've conducted a study and I've gotten to know that, okay, what can be possible? I hope you all know what victimization is all about. People who are bullied. So I've gotten to know that, okay, victimization could affect anxiety. So I want to find out what is really causing victimization to have an effect on anxiety. So it means that I should get a third variable which could explain why this is happening. So it means I can say that, I could say that, resilience. Individuals who have low resilience could explain why victimization leads to anxiety. It means that individuals who are more bullied and have low resilience could be more anxious. So it means resilience or low resilience is explaining the reason as to why victimization causes a lot of anxiety. So I hope you get it. So it means that resilience in there is explaining why there's a relationship between two variables, that's victimization and anxiety. So it means resilience is serving as a mediator. That's what it means. Or it is a mediating variable. Okay, then the same research work, that's victimization causing anxiety. We can also get a moderating variable. For instance, we can use a variable known as social support. Social support could help us understand or could change the direction of the relationship that we have. So the relationship is that more resilience leads to more anxiety. So this is a typical positive relationship. So this, you should use psychostat information. So when you say there's a positive relationship, it means that when one variable is high, the other is also high. So it means more victimization leads to more anxiety. But we want to change that sort of relationship. So we can use a third variable, which is maybe social support. So it means if there's more social support, that relationship that we have when it comes to victimization and anxiety could reduce. It means when people have social support and they are even victimized, their anxiety, it does what? It decreases. So it means social support has changed the direction of the relationship from positive relationship to a negative relationship. Hence, social support is serving as a moderator, or it is a moderating variable. So these are some of the variables. So please, any question? Isaac.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Isaac, please go ahead.
Situational variable, also known as variable.
You said situational variable is also known as?
Extraneous variable. Extraneous variables.
That's what I said. I said to some extent it could be a form of extraneous or confounding variables.
Okay.
All right. So any other question or clarification? Patrick.
Yes, sir. Sir, please, about the participant variable or subject, can we also say that the individuals who have allowed themselves to be, let me say, who have allowed themselves to be, how do you call it? Who have allowed themselves in an experiment in order to be measured or something, they also fall under the participant variable or subject variable.
Yes, participant, when you say participant, it's basically about the people that we've selected. But we want to find out, our focus is on the different characteristics within our participants. That's the variables that we want. When you say participant variable, our focus is on the different participants within the various participants that we've selected, or the various subjects that we've selected. So their age, level of education, and so on. That's our focus. Akusia, your hand is up. Hello, Akusia, your hand is up. Okay, so I think it's by mistake. So let me go ahead. So the next one is categorical variables. So under categorical variables, we can have participant variables. When you say categorical variables, you know about it. It's related to the research cycle start that we did. It's related to the cycle start that we did. So it means that the variables we can categorize it. We can easily categorize it like age or gender. We can categorize gender to be what? Male, female. Okay, level of education could be primary to tertiary, or level 100 to 400 in that order. So that's a typical categorical variable. All right. And one thing you should know is that in research work, our main focus is on what? Bernard.
Sorry, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Yeah, I just want us to establish something. Yeah, before the one proud to the one before this slide. I want to ask a question there, please. If you can go there, I want to, please, the one before this one.
Okay.
Nice one. What is the difference between the subject variable and the response variable? Aren't they talking about human beings? What is the difference there, please, sir?
What's the difference between response variable and subject variable?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. One thing about subject variable is that our focus is on the subject themselves. So the main focus is on the subject themselves. And I think with a response variable, we even talk about it earlier. So I don't know whether you were here. We were able to give difference between the subject and the response, which is this one. So I'm surprised you are asking again. So I think you'll be taking us back. So what I can do is that I'm recording. Afterwards, you can have the slides, the recorded ones, and play back. I think that'll be better. Okay, so let me mute all of you again. So the thing is, our main focus is on the independent and the dependent variable. So the independent variable, they are basically the variables that we manipulate. So when we say we are manipulating a variable, it means that we can easily change them. So for instance, the research work that topic that I just indicated, how caffeine affects mood. The independent variable here is caffeine. Why? Because caffeine, we can manipulate it in the sense that we can change the quantity of it to a participant. So a researcher can say, okay, I can give 1 cup of caffeine to some group of participants and also give 2 cups of caffeine to another group of participants. Then afterwards, I'll test their mood. So it means with the IV, which is the independent variable, you can easily manipulate or change it into different levels. Then afterwards, you test your dependent variable, which is also known as the response variable. Okay. Yeah, so these are some examples of studies. So effect of caffeine on memory, it means caffeine is the IV, memory is the DV. Then how alcohol reduce anxiety, alcohol is the IV, then anxiety is the DV. So that's what happens. So always the independent variable, you can easily manipulate it or change it into several forms. So you are tasked to identify the independent variable and the dependent variable in these topics. And I think it's quite easier for you to do that. Okay. So the next one has to do with extraneous variables. So as we indicated earlier, extraneous and confounding variables, basically they are variables which are not of interest to the researcher, but could have significant influence in the study that the researcher is doing. So for instance, the caffeine example that I use, that's caffeine and mood, whereby I said, maybe the room temperature is what? It's very, very hot because the air conditioning is not working. The researcher's focus is not on the room temperature. That's not what the experiment is all about. But to a large extent, the researcher ought to reduce that variable, because if it is not reduced, then it means it could have an influence on the research that a person is doing. Or maybe a researcher wants to conduct a study to find out how auditory information influence memory. Okay, so or even how music influence memory. Then the place that the researcher is conducting the study, it is noisy. The place is very, very loud. It's noisy. So it means the researcher's focus is not on the noise, but rather how music affects memory. But if the researcher doesn't reduce or control noise, noise could have an influence on the study that the researcher is doing. So it means noise is an extraneous variable, which is confounding the study. So it means it needs to be reduced. All right. So in research, every experiment has certain extraneous or confounding variables that needs to be reduced. So it is the researcher who has to identify the extraneous and the confounding variables and make effort to reduce them, because if it is not reduced, it could affect the internal validity of the study that the person is doing. So we'll talk more about internal validity. What are the things that reduces the validity of any study? later.
Local.
Okay. So please, any question? So that will be the end of session. Is it session 3 or so? So if you have questions, please, there's the time.
Yeah.
Or else I'm moving on to session, the next session. Hello, any question? Vincent.
So what could be the difference between the extraneous variable and the confound variable or the confound? What could be the difference?
Good. Good. Okay, so in most situations, in research work, we're trying as much as possible. We normally say that confounding and extraneous variable, they are quite similar in that regard. Because in confounding variable, for instance, we are trying to find out how a third variable could affect both the independent and the dependent variable. Okay, so within the confounding variable, we have certain extraneous variables. So it means if there are certain variables in there which could have similar effects on the DV, then it means it is extraneous. Confounding variable is the big umbrella. Then out of it, we have extraneous variables in there. So in most situations, we normally say that they are what? They are quite similar or they are the same. All right. So please, any other question? Someone's.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so Patrick, go ahead.
Sir, please. In situations whereby maybe placebo is being used, how do we also differentiate that one from that of confounding variable?
Can you repeat what you said? In situations whereby placebo
is it mostly there's this word used which is placebo. So how do we also differentiate that one itself from
Patrick? I think you're confusing something. Placebo has nothing to do with extraneous variable and confounding variable. We'll come to that later. Placebo is more or less like a control group. Control groups, they are the ones who receive the placebo. So I don't want to bore you with a lot of information for the meantime. We'll come to it later.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Samuel. Samuel, please go ahead. Unmute your mic and speak. All right. So Vivian, please go ahead.
Hello, sir. Sorry, I joined the class very late. Can you can you repeat the extraneous variable and the confound one for me?
Well,
can you go over that?
I said when it comes to the extraneous and the confounding variable, the confounding variable is more or less like a big umbrella. Okay. Then out of it, we could have certain extraneous variable. So we normally say that with a confounding variable, it is more or less like the third variable, which could influence both the IV and the DV, which is the independent and the dependent variable. So in there, we can have an extraneous variable whereby we are saying the variable which could have kind of